The moment Donald Trump shocked the world in 2016, the left struck back, not with policy, but with a coordinated smear. One of the biggest political hit jobs in history, the Russian collusion hoax. Over the course of Donald Trump's presidency, Democrats and the mainstream media relentlessly peddled one narrative. Trump was in cahoots with Moscow. But from secret servers to dossier leaks and never-ending investigations, how much of it was real? How much of it was spin? And what happened when it all fell apart? This is episode 3, the Russia hoax. Time to separate facts from fiction.
Do you remember the name George Papadopoulos? George Papadopoulos, you might remember, he was a foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign in 2016. And it was his meetings with Russian government intermediaries who were offering dirt on Hillary Clinton during the 2016 campaign that started the whole investigation into Russia interfering in that election to try to hurt Clinton and help Trump. The whole thing went back to George Papadopoulos talking to intermediaries for the Russian government.
It all started with a young Trump campaign advisor named George Papadopoulos. In early 2016, while meeting and drinking in a bar with a foreign professor with ties to Russian interests, Papadopoulos was allegedly told that Russia had dirt on Hillary Clinton in the form of thousands of emails. That professor then told U.S. intelligence about that conversation, and that is when the FBI opened up Crossfire Hurricane, an investigation into the Trump campaign. But here's the key. The emails he was referring to weren't some secret Russian operation. They were already being hinted at by WikiLeaks, which was tied to Clinton's private email server scandal. But still, the Democrats and the media twisted the entire episode into a so-called smoking gun. And the collusion hoax was born.
The guy whose emails these all come from is John Podesta. Used to work in the Bill Clinton White House. Now is the Hillary Clinton campaign chairman. He came back on the plane last night to explain it this way.
Why? Why would there be this active engagement by the Russians and the DNC and other democratic organizations in my private email account? Well, I think you could start by looking at the positions that Mr. Trump has taken during the course of this campaign. One more consistent with Russian foreign policy than U.S. foreign policy.
So he's trying to lay this all on that, Donald Trump is in cahoots with the Russians, or at least he's on the same page as the Russians, and that's why the Russians are doing this.
This was not a secret running up to the election. The president-elect, in some of his political events, specifically said to the Russians, hack Hillary's emails so that we can finally find out what's going on and confirm our conspiracy theories.
Mr. Watts, off of your testimony yesterday, which was enlightening and frightening, and we're in the early stages of this investigation as a country and as a business, the media, news business, but at this point, are you worried or concerned about the potential of collusion between elements of the Trump campaign and Russian intelligence services?
Yes. There's two ways to look at how Russian active measures get propelled, amongst the Trump campaign. Is it coordination and synchronization? And at times we saw people say, hey, on Twitter, I've talked to Guccifer. I've talked to WikiLeaks, and they've got something coming out. To me, that's collusion when I see that. The other part is opportunism, which is also strange. Why would you look to Russian propaganda to go against your American opponent? That's crazy, especially coming from a Republican candidate, looking back to the Reagan era. This is the party that was tough on the Soviet Union, tough on Russia, and we've got a candidate and now president that's citing Russian propaganda to go after his opponents. Wow. So either scenario is scary. I think collusion's, the worst case, obviously.
While the media and the Democrats were screaming Russian collusion, behind the scenes, they were paying for the very story they were selling. Enter the Steele Dossier, a collection of wild, unverified claims about Trump compiled by a former British spy, Christopher Steele, and funded by the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. It was opposition research dressed up as intelligence, and it was fed directly to the FBI, the media, and even members of Congress. This wasn't just a political hit job, it became the backbone of the Russian hoax.
Meanwhile, new information shows the FBI used a controversial dossier of alleged contacts between President Trump and Russian agents as evidence for a secret surveillance warrant. Sources confirm to CBS News that the FBI obtained the dossier full of allegations that Russian intelligence has compromising information about the president. The dossier also claims the Russians had contacts with former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. The FBI later asked a judge for a warrant to monitor Page's communications. Page, meanwhile, denies any wrongdoing. And we want to welcome in Congressman Adam Schiff of California. He's the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Thanks for joining us, Congressman.
Good to be with
All
you.
right, so let's talk about this dossier. When we first heard about it, there was some discussion as to whether or not the content was even valid. Certainly salacious, very interesting stuff, but truthful, we didn't know. How important is this dossier, do you think?
Well, I'm very limited in what I can discuss on the particulars investigation, but certainly we have an interest in knowing what parts of the dossier are accurate or may be accurate, whether it's any of the dossier, much of the dossier, none of the dossier. So this is certainly something that we're investigating.
Right.
And obviously a lot of the allegations within the dossier go to issues of either coordination or collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, or the issue of potentially compromising material. Those general issues are very much within the scope of our investigation.
But Jeff, you're also looking into the dossier that raised questions during the transition and is now reportedly gaining more credibility in the intel community. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's the dossier that came to light in early January. Remember, there was this there was a lot to do about this dossier that President-elect Trump at the time was briefed on by FBI Director James Comey, who gave him a summary of these unsubstantiated allegations that were contained in this dossier that was gathered by a former British spy. And so since that dossier became public, the FBI and other intelligence agencies have been working to vet that information, trying to determine if any of it is true. And what we have learned from our sources is that there are some aspects of that dossier that they may never be able to confirm are true or disprove. However, there are, according to our sources, some aspects of that dossier that are turning out to be true, at least, and they're operating on a confidence scale here. There is increasing confidence that there are some aspects of that dossier that are indeed true.
But it didn't stop with the dossier being written. It was just getting started. The FBI knew it was unverified, and the media knew it was politically funded. And yet they ran with it anyway. What came next was one of the most reckless abuses of power in modern political history, all in the name of stopping Donald Trump. How was this document used by the FBI? Well, in late 2016, the FBI used it to justify a FISA warrant to spy on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. The agents knew the dossier was unverified, yet it was cited as key evidence. Key facts were left out. Contradictions were ignored. And once the FBI had that warrant, they kept it going, renewing it 4 times, each time relying on the same shaky material. All the while, leaking select parts of the dossier to the media, so CNN, MSNBC, and others could frame Trump as a Russian asset without ever mentioning where they got that information from.
This week, we saw cold, hard evidence of the Trump campaign, indeed the Trump family, eagerly intending to collude possibly with Russia, a hostile foreign power, to influence American elections. In the month, again, as we celebrate the courage of our founders, Republicans in Congress have become enablers of the Trump-Russia assault on our democracy. After these latest revelations, it's becoming clear we have suffered a desecration of our democracy not seen since Watergate. Speaker Ryan must allow a vote on an outside independent commission to get to the bottom of the Trump campaign's role in Russia's assault on our democracy and prevent Putin from ever doing it again, immediately. Outside independent commission. It's not just about what happened in the past, it's to prevent it from happening again.
Can you agree that there has been no evidence of collusion, coordination, or conspiracy that has been presented thus far between the Trump campaign and Russia?
No, I don't agree with that at all. I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight. Now,
calling it deeply troubling, very suspect, and a constitutional crisis. They're part of a growing number of Democrats calling for a special prosecutor to be appointed to oversee ongoing investigations into Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election.
On May 17th, 2017, the Democrats got their way. Robert Mueller was officially sworn in as special counsel. What was supposed to be a focused investigation quickly turned into a 2-year political saga, dragging out headlines, fueling speculation, and keeping the Trump presidency under a constant cloud. Day after day, and media leak after leak, Mueller's team of prosecutors, many of them with ties to Democrats, dug into every corner of Donald Trump's life, campaign, and administration. This wasn't an investigation, it was a strategy. Stall, smear, and hope something sticks. And the media? They loved every minute of it.
And we begin with that breaking headline: the White House blindsided tonight as the Department of Justice reveals that they will appoint a special counsel to now oversee the FBI investigation into Russian meddling and any possible collusion. Former FBI Director Robert Mueller will now lead the investigation. Democrats and some Republicans had been calling for this move. The news coming just 24 hours after we learned that former FBI Director James Comey, who was fired by President Trump, kept notes about his meetings with the president. The Department of Justice saying just moments ago a special counsel is necessary for the American people to have full confidence in the outcome.
As you can imagine, President Trump was not happy with this, but the Democrats were also trying to put plans in place on how they could protect the special counsel from the president himself.
Mr. President, I'd like to get your reaction to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein's decision to appoint a special counsel to investigate the Russian interference in the campaign. Was this the right move, or is this part of a witch hunt?
Well, I respect the move, but the entire thing has been a witch hunt, and there is no collusion between certainly myself and my campaign, but I can always speak for myself and the Russians, zero. I think it divides the country. I think we have a very divided country because of that and many other things. Next question.
Next question. As you look back over the past 6 months or year, have you had any recollection where you've wondered if anything you have done has been something that might be worthy of criminal charges in these investigations or impeachment, as some on the left are implying?
I think it's totally ridiculous. Everybody thinks so. Everybody, even my enemies, have said there is no collusion.
While Mueller himself stayed silent, the story was told through a steady stream of coordinated leaks. Grand jury subpoenas, sealed indictments, secret testimony, all somehow landing in the laps of CNN and the New York Times, and just in time for the nightly news cycle. The media ran with it. The narrative was always the same. Trump's cornered. Indictments are coming. It's only a matter of time. But here's what they never told you. The Mueller team wasn't neutral. It was political. Out of 17 lawyers, 13 were registered Democrats or Clinton-Obama donors. One even represented the Clinton Foundation, and another attended Hillary's election night party. 0 Trump supporters, just 13 angry Democrats handpicked to find something, anything, to bring the president down. The investigation didn't have a bias problem, it had a mission: destroy Donald Trump.
Thank you, sir. This morning, the president marked the one-year anniversary of the Mueller investigation, saying it's disgusting, illegal, unwarranted, and a witch hunt. But his own FBI director yesterday said it's not a witch hunt. Why does the White House still believe it's a witch hunt? And why did he cancel his news conference this afternoon, which was originally set for 3 o'clock with the NATO Secretary
Different
General?
topics, but the president knows that there was no collusion in the campaign, and he has been quite clear about this. It's gone on for over a year. They found no evidence of collusion and still strongly believe that it's a witch hunt. I'm not sure how we could be any more clear, and certainly not sure how the president could be any more clear about his beliefs and his opinion.
As far as the witch hunt statement by the president, he's often, several times a day usually, calls it a witch hunt. His FBI director, the man he nominated, confirmed to be the FBI director, Christopher Wray, as recently as yesterday, told Congress during testimony this was not a witch hunt. Still with us as well, after he said this is the greatest witch hunt in American history. There is still no collusion, no obstruction. The only collusion was that done by Democrats who were unable to win an election despite the spending of far more money.
That's right. The difference between Christopher Wray, the FBI director, and Donald Trump is that Christopher Wray may have a window into the evidence that actually is being gathered. And so when he says it's not a witch hunt, he perhaps is saying that from an informed, factual predicate, whereas the president is just wishing it to be so. And we saw, Richard Nixon say at the one-year anniversary of Watergate that this was essentially a waste of everyone's time and a witch hunt, and that it should just go away too. It didn't work out that well. 12 or 14 months later, he was no longer president. So,
all right, we have breaking news here, and I want to stipulate we do not read every one of the president's tweets out loud. However, this morning he is writing about things that get to the breaking news of the day, which is his mood and his fixations and his preoccupations, including with the Mueller investigation. He did meet with his lawyers extensively Monday and Tuesday. This is what the president just wrote. The inner workings of the Mueller investigations are a total mess. They have found no collusion and have gone absolutely nuts. They are screaming and shouting at people, horribly threatening them to come up with answers they want. They are a disgrace to our nation and don't care how many lives they ruin. These are angry people, including the highly conflicted Bob Mueller, who worked for Obama for 8 years. He didn't, by the way. They won't even look at all the bad acts and crimes on the other side. A total witch hunt like no other in American history.
Senator, so you sent a letter, turning to a different topic, to the Mueller probe with your colleagues to the chain of command at justice below Sessions and Rosenstein to say, look, commit to protecting the Mueller probe should something happen to those above you. So what was the purpose of this letter? Why now? And what is making you worried that their statements on the record about this are important now?
What worries me, and the reason I led that letter, is the swirling reports, credible, unspecific, unconfirmed, about the potential for Donald Trump firing Bob Mueller, special counsel. He tried it once. He fired Jim Comey. The tweets are increasingly erratic and extreme. His legal team is in turmoil. And Bob Mueller literally is at the Oval Office door, and he's knocking hard. And the Trump surrogates are threatening this investigation, asking for a special counsel to be appointed to shut it down, in effect. This kind of obstruction of justice is literally happening in real time before our eyes. It's almost a textbook example of what obstruction of justice could be. That kind of offer of pardon is very damning and powerful evidence that the president was intending to tamper with witnesses, and the deniability will simply not hold water.
After 2 years of leaks, speculation, and nonstop media hype, the moment finally came. The Mueller report was released in March of 2019. No evidence of collusion, no charges for Trump. The hoax collapsed in black and white. President Trump declared total vindication. But the Democrats? They couldn't let it go. Even though Mueller found no evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, the report didn't shut the door. It left it cracked open. Instead of saying Trump was exonerated, Mueller included one carefully worded line that the Democrats and the media clung to like oxygen. If we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. That single sentence, vague, noncommittal, and completely unnecessary, gave Democrats exactly what they needed to keep the narrative alive. They took it and ran with it. Forget about the 400 pages of no collusion. That one line became the new headline. Mueller didn't clear Trump. It wasn't about justice anymore. It was about damage control.
If we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, however, we are unable to reach that judgment, close quote. Now, does that say there was no obstruction?
No.
In fact, you are actually unable to conclude the president did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
Well, we, at the outset, determined that we, when it came to the president's culpability, we needed to go forward only after taking into account the OLC opinion that indicated that a president, a sitting president, cannot be indicted.
So the report did not conclude that he did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what about total exoneration? Did you actually totally exonerate the president?
No.
Now, in fact, your report expressly states that it does not exonerate the president.
It does.
Investigation is over, and according to a senior DOJ official, there will be no further indictments. That means no charges against the president, his children, or his associates after all those meetings with the Russians. Not only that, but the special counsel completed his report and signed off on it without ever directly interviewing the President of the United States about collusion or obstruction of justice. After 2 years of looking into President Trump, his campaign, and the Kremlin's unprecedented interference in the 2016 election, Special Counsel Mueller has now delivered his findings to the Justice Department. And today at 5 p.m., word came from the Justice Department that they notified Congress that the Russian probe is officially over. Ken, my biggest question, and I'm going to have this along until somebody answers it, how can the president be pointed to as leading collusion with Russia, of aiding a Russian conspiracy to interfere with our elections, if none of his henchmen, none of his children, none of his associates have been indicted? At best, it was a RICO situation where he was giving orders to people to do stuff with the Russians. If none of them were indicted, how can he be blamed? I'm just questioning. That's my big one.
Chris, I think the answer is he cannot be in a criminal sense.
Just moments after the redacted report was released, President Trump interrupting a celebration of wounded warriors, labeling Robert Mueller's conclusions a personal victory.
They're having a good day. I'm having a good day, too. It was called no collusion, no obstruction. There never was, by the way, and there never will be.
The president casting himself as a victim.
This hoax, it should never happen to another president again.
But while the special counsel's report didn't put the president in immediate legal jeopardy, politically it gives Democrats plenty of new ammunition, especially on the issue of obstruction.
After nearly 2 years, over 500 witnesses, and more than $32 million in taxpayer money, the Mueller investigation came up empty. No evidence of Trump-Russia collusion, but instead of admitting the truth, the Democrats moved the goalposts. They clung to that one vague sentence and pivoted the narrative from collusion to obstruction, refusing to accept the facts they didn't like. And when that didn't stick, they launched their next attack. In episode 4, we'll cover how a routine phone call with Ukraine became the left's excuse for impeachment number 1, and how the Democrats turned a foreign policy moment into political theater. The Russian hoax may have failed, but the war on Trump was just getting started. Thanks for watching.